Hi everyone, and welcome to 3513 Video Games in Society. This first video is going to give you a brief overview of the course, including some background about me, some background about the assignments, and the overall structure of the class. My name is Dr. James Alex Bonus. I go by my middle name Alex, so you're welcome to call me Dr. Bonus, or just Alex is fine with me. Some background about me as a faculty member here at Ohio State. My research interests focus on childhood media experiences. This tends to focus on two broadly different areas of work. One focused on young children and how they learn from educational media, often things like science television shows. And then also adults and their responses to what I often call nostalgic media, which is reflecting on media experiences that you had as a child. So like, for example, playing beloved video games from your childhood again, once you've reached adulthood. So what kind of thoughts and feelings do you have while you engage in those kinds of experiences? Obviously, that work doesn't, neither of those kind of research areas are directly focused on video games, but I did want to mention that I have published two studies on video games. There were two of the earlier studies in my career, so while I was still in graduate school, that's where a lot of my interest sort of initially derived from. So I put some links here in the lecture slides, so you can check those out if you're interested. One was looking at undergraduate students' enjoyment of violent video games and what that sort of meant for different outcomes. And then the other study was on nostalgic responses to the augmented reality game Pokemon Go, which was released in 2016. And so we did a cool survey study that summer of how people were responding to the game. So that's a little bit about me. If you have any questions about any of that, or if you want to talk about my research or any other sort of research ideas further at any point this semester, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, you might not have any interest in that research, but I just wanted to kind of give you a sense of who I was and where I'm coming from and what I'm doing here at Ohio State. In terms of the course structure, I wanted to give you some background about how I've thought through this current iteration of the course. So this is, I've taught video games in society many times before, and I've changed it every time I've taught it. Basically, I'm still trying to work through what I think the best course design should be. And the way that I've tended to approach it is different than what I've seen sort of other professors do, both at this university and at other universities. And so the typical video games course, as I would call it, generally gives you a broad overview of research findings of studies that have been done on video games and the effects that they have on people. And this type of class would typically just give you broad exposure to many different areas of research, be that research on violent video games, maybe sexualized video games, educational video games, augmented reality video games, virtual reality video games, you name it. It'll sort of just go week by week, give you lots of different research findings. And I found that both as a student taking that kind of class and as a professor teaching that kind of class, it can be hard to know what to take away. Sort of what are the big picture messages that that you're meant to sort of walk away from the class, because we all know that 6 months after you leave a course, you're not remembering all the nitty-gritty details of the things that you learned. You tend to remember sort of big picture things. And when the class is sort of organized topically like that, it can be hard to know what you're intended to learn or to sort of take away from the class. And so the other issue with that is that research evidence and studies that are done on the topic of video games are constantly changing and constantly evolving. So there's always new work that's coming out that's sort of changing what we know about video games. And so it was the case where I would sometimes teach a study, and then by the next time I taught the class, that study was sort of no longer relevant. And so I was sort of struggling as a faculty member of really figuring out, what is the message that I want students to take away? How can I ensure that that message is still consistent 6 months later and not something that's changed? And so the way that I have dealt with that issue and the way that I've structured this current course is that rather than just sort of teach you about lots of different research findings from lots of different research areas, my goal is to teach you how to independently read and interpret video game research so that you can walk away from this class and continue to keep up with that research even after you've sort of learned about it in this class. And so my idea here is to offer you a more critical approach to learning about video games so that you can be a more critical consumer of the research that's out there. So it's not just me feeding you research findings and asking you to tell me those research findings back. It's really me saying, here's how studies are done, here's how we should think about research. Here are the issues with that research, and now go off and sort of figure that out on your own. Read your own studies and sort of tell me what you learned from reading those studies. And the idea here is that as research changes, you'll be able to sort of update your knowledge in the future, even when you no longer are kind of attending my lectures or asking me questions or taking my exams or what have you. And so it's really meant to make you a smarter, more well-rounded sort of consumer of academic research. With that in mind, the course has broadly 4 general units, and so I'll just kind of give you the names of these units here, and obviously we'll go into much more depth with these as we go through the semester. But the first 4 weeks are going to give us the foundations of video game research. So what are these tools that we tend to use when we're studying video games, at least in my field of quantitative social science. After that, the following 4 weeks will be focused on obstacles in video game research. So what are these sort of big picture issues that we often encounter as researchers trying to study video games? What sort of limits what we're able to learn from studies, and how does that limit the types of knowledge that we're able to generate from those studies? The subsequent 4 weeks will focus on big picture debates in video game research. So given these obstacles that we actually have in these studies, what are these sort of larger societal questions that we have about video games, and how do we tend to talk about those issues and sort of use research as evidence and ignore research as evidence in all these different and interesting kinds of ways? And then the final 4 weeks of the class will be looking at practical applications of video game research. So what types of employment jobs could you get as a video game researcher, actually applying these research skills that we're sort of talking about this semester. So hopefully leaving the course with a clear idea of how all this kind of high level academic stuff plays out in more real life career settings. Some further background on this course. So as I mentioned before, lots of video games classes tend to give you exposure to lots of different areas of video game research. And again, my issue with that is that it becomes hard to really see how research develops in one particular area over time, how that field sort of responds to critiques of that research over time, and how do you sort of fit lessons together across those different topics. And so rather than give you a bunch of different exposures to different kinds of video game research, I've decided to structure this course around a deep dive on research on violent video games specifically. And now the reason I've done that is, one, because the society has sort of deemed this an important issue that we have to research and understand, sort of what is the impact of violent video games on people. But more importantly, it's the area of research that we have the most studies available on. So it's a very popular area of research, and it illustrates a lot of these issues really well that I want to talk about this semester, about what are sort of the obstacles we face in studying video games? How do these studies tend to be talked about in the kind of social sphere, in the political sphere? How do we respond to those criticisms and try to do research better as we move along? And so it illustrates all these really cool concepts that I really want to dive into this semester about study design, how science progresses over time, how we grapple with conflicting evidence in science, and how do we try to resolve scholarly disagreements in science. And so I wanted to preface that by saying you might get sick and tired of reading about violent video games by the end of the semester, but I'm doing it very purposefully because I think it will help you understand these concepts by focusing in on one area very narrowly, rather than trying to explore it across lots and lots of different areas across the semester. But all that to say, you will have many opportunities to apply these concepts that we're learning to other areas of video game research, particularly in some of the course assignments that you're going to be dealing with, which I'll talk about next. So in terms of those major assignments that we're looking at this semester, the kind of big, I would say most important ones that you're probably going to be most interested in learning about are these gameplay assignments. And so gameplay assignments are really your exams for this course. And I've sort of recontextualized how I think about exams now that we've sort of been online for a while. And so as a professor, I had to sort of change my thinking about what do I kind of view as an exam. What's the goal of an exam? Is it really to kind of just test, like get you to regurgitate like the findings of research studies, or do I want to kind of test some higher level skills that are more appropriate to test when you're sort of out of the classroom, wherever you might be taking the exam out in the world. And so gameplay assignments are going to consist of 3 components. And so the first component is going to be a reflection, where I'm actually going to assign you a video game to play. And I'll put video game in quotes because some of these are kind of not video games as you might typically think about them. There's going to be some educational video games, some brain training games. The final gameplay assignment will be a more popular game that you might sort of think about more typical as a video game, which will be Fortnite. And you can get more details about this on the syllabus. But basically, what I'll ask you to do is play a video game for about 20 to 30 minutes. You'll then do a short reflection about sort of the experience of playing that video game. You'll then do a 1 to 2 readings about studies that have been done on that particular video game that you played. And then you're going to answer a series of multiple choice questions about those studies. And basically, what did you learn from those studies? What do they say about the video game? What can we conclude about the effects of that video game based on those studies? And basically, what are the limitations of those studies? Which one do you buy into more? Which one do you buy into less? What are those studies unable to tell us? So it's a bunch of things that basically each week that you're assigned a gameplay assignment, which will be 3 times over the course of the semester, you'll have 3 tasks that week. You'll play a video game, reflect on that video game, you'll do some readings about that video game, and then you'll answer some multiple choice questions about that video game, or those studies that have been done on that video game. And the goal there is to basically give you an opportunity to read research on a new area of research that we have not been talking about in lecture, and then apply those skills that we've been trying to practice in lecture about reading research, critiquing that research, and recognizing the limitations of that research. And I'll give you more details on these assignments as we go along, but these will be your sort of major exams for the semester, these 3 different weeks where we complete these gameplay assignments. And I'm hoping that they're hopefully kind of fun because you actually get to see how research is done on real video games, what that looks like, and actually apply these skills that you've been practicing. So hopefully a little more dynamic than sort of the typical exam that you'd have in your other classes. Very quickly, again, you'll get more details about these assignments. The other major kind of outside of class thing that you'll be doing is what we call an experiment proposal. And so you'll be basically pulling up research on a video game topic of your choice. Again, this is another opportunity for you to read about research that isn't just on violent video games, which is otherwise the focus of the class. So there'll be 3 assignments here over the course of the semester. You'll identify existing research on a topic of your choice, you'll critique that research, and then you'll propose a study that's intended to address the limitations of that research and sort of teach us something new about that area of research. So both the gameplay assignments and the experiment proposal assignments intended to give you exposure to other areas of video game research that you're otherwise not getting the opportunity to see in our typical course lectures. A few other sort of minor things. Over the course of the semester, you'll have some opportunities to take some questionnaires, and these are intended to get you to reflect on what you're learning in the course, ask me questions about the course, and also give me feedback about how the course is going so I can sort of tweak things as we go along. You'll also have some practice quizzes, and these are intended to prepare you for those gameplay assignments so that you sort of know what questions are going to look like, you know what types of things you're going to be asked about. And these are really intended to, in a way, be freebie kinds of points. So you'll have 2 attempts to complete each quiz. We'll take only the highest score of the 2 attempts. We're also going to drop your lowest score. So there'll be 6 practice quizzes throughout the semester. Only 5 of those quizzes will count toward your final score. And again, 2 attempts to take them, highest score only counts. So really just intended to be kind of freebie practice so that you're ready for those gameplay assignments when we get there. And then in preparation for your game experiment proposal, you'll have an opportunity to pose a video game hypothesis, which is basically proposing your topic to me so that I can help you narrow and refine that topic so that you're able to find research about it when you're sort of left to start that experiment proposal. So that's all for this video on the course structure. The main thing I want to sort of end with here is to say, don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions. I have weekly office hours that you'll be able to kind of attend. You don't have to tell me that you're coming. You can just show up and it's there for you. But I'm happy to schedule additional times if those office hours do not work for you. So please feel free to email me. Please feel free to ask questions as the course goes along. My experience teaching online classes is really that students don't reach out often enough. I know it can feel weird, but I really am here to help. I really enjoy interacting with you guys and seeing how you're grappling with the material, and I really do want to help you have a good experience in this class. So whenever you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And if you're scared to talk to me, don't hesitate to reach out to our TA, and you can find all of our contact information on the syllabus.